I am not a psychologist. My master's was in women's studies, in women's spirituality, but my passion is women's issues and spirituality generally. And yes, you're quite right. I have considered the heroic journey both as a theory and in relation to the tarot from a female perspective. I'm certainly not the first person to do that, and I won't be the last, I hope. What I've tried to do today, if you have a look at your timetable after you sort your cards, is I've tried to make this as much as possible a hands-on experience. I went to a wonderful 2-day workshop a few months ago on the Enneagram, but the whole 2 days we sat taking notes because there was so much information, and particularly in a setting like the Tarot Guild, I think the whole idea is to try and apply. So as much as possible, I will be getting you to work on your journeys. But I do have some information to impart, and mostly I'll try and impart that in the first half of the day when you're a bit fresher, so that by the time you're getting a bit you can have lunch, and particularly in the second half, you'll be doing much more work by yourselves, or with me, but your own work. But there will be some hands-on work in every session, in every session between breaks. So the first part, someone said to me yesterday, "Oh, how do you feel about doing the workshop?" I said, "I'm fine, except for the first 40 minutes, because that's when I have to impart a bit of theory, and I don't want to, I don't want you to think, oh my God, this is just going to be a lecture all day." But there needs to be a bit of theory behind what I'm doing. So today we are talking about journeys. We all take journeys all the time. We can talk about our life journey, but that's really something we can see how it's going progressively, but in the way we can analyse, and we'll be analysing certain heroines today, we can't because we haven't finished ours yet. But we take all sorts of journeys. Really every new major experience is a journey. And ideally journeys are something that are challenging and from which we grow. And hopefully, or theoretically, we grow internally as well as externally. Although I think there are some journeys we take that can retard our growth for a while, personally. We'll also be talking mythology. And mythology is my passion, one of them, and I think it's because, and I do frequently lecture, or I used to until July, in mythology. I actually gave it up because they pay so poorly, tertiary institutions. I decided it wasn't worth the money. But it's a passion of mine, and I think it's because mythology speaks to our soul. The stories and the heroes and heroines from mythology ring in our self with a capital S, and one of the problems with mythology and in the past or in the present is that there aren't that many heroines that have taken journeys. And there's a very simple reason for that, because in the past women did not have roles in society in which they had the freedom to take journeys. So,
because men wrote most of the stories?
yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's also because the mythology that's been handed down is conveyed to us by men, as is history. And that's why a lot of work's been done by feminists in the area of history to sort of try and not so much rewrite it as present it. The whole notion of postmodernism is sort of deconstructing the masculine history and saying, well, there's other stories. All history is subjective, and you've all presented it from your male perspective. My discussion of the tarot and discussion of heroic journeys is from a psycho-spiritual perspective. I find it impossible to separate the two. So I feel that once we go on a journey of personal discovery, well, for me, it becomes a journey to understand my spirituality. So there are many other ways of looking at the tarot, and I'm not in any way denigrating them, but it's important that you're aware that that's my perspective. The whole of Western philosophy, and to some extent Eastern, is based on a dual system, a system of duality. The notion of there being opposites, that you only recognise one by the other. So we can name darkness as darkness only because we also know there is light. And I'm therefore working within that model, although I'm not necessarily saying I support it. It's just the model that's usually used. So, journeys. Just before we start, the theory, I'd just like to just write down a few journeys that you might see as heroic journeys that you may have taken or be planning to take. There's, of course, there is the life's journey. We know that. Which we're halfway through, or a quarter of the way through, or 7/8 of the way through. Who knows? But only the god and goddess know. But there are also literal journeys. Linda's a marvel for them. So, you know, the great travel journeys. But what are some of the other journeys that we take in life?
Understanding the tarot.
Yes, understanding the tarot. It's a process, isn't it? It's not something you buy a deck and the next day you've got it. It's an ongoing journey, probably a journey that doesn't end, I would suggest, but it's certainly a journey.
Relationship.
Yes, and there you open a whole new ball game, because it can be falling in love for the first time, and the whole movement towards a real relationship, and then perhaps at a later time the breaking up of that relationship in some cases, or the way it changes over time. So, and they can be relationships that are romantic, they can be relationships with a sibling or a parent or a best friend. What other journeys? Career journeys. And many people these days, that is a big thing, and it's not a one-off. And I don't know what for you in your professional reading, but I certainly find career to be the most significant thing that women ask about these days. And nobody seems to just have one career for life in the way that they used to. So it's a journey. You can look at the career journey from the first career to the last, or you can look at the development of one skill into a career. Any others?
Self-discovery.
Yes, well, that's right. And that sort of is part of the life journey, but absolutely. Self-discovery or self-development. Yes, purpose, our purpose. So that's just a few. you will shortly be defining some of your own. Okay, so I suppose in philosophical terms or psychological terms, I would call myself a post-Jungian. That means that I actually am an avid follower, an ardent fan, adoring fan of Jung, but I'm also aware of the limitations that his time and his environment placed on him. His model was undoubtedly a masculine model. And that's because in those days, in fact until really recently, everything was written that was written about mankind, which was meant to include all humans, was actually about men.
But he had a lot of female patients.
Oh yes, he had lots of female patients. And he was totally progressive in the fact that he was probably the first Western thinker to say men need to get in touch with their feminine side. So I'm not taking anything away from him, but nevertheless, even in his own words, his model was a masculine one. And when he was asked, well, what about women? What about women? He said, oh, well, you just reverse it. That's exactly what he said. Oh, well, you know, having said, you know, men have to find their feminine or women have to find their masculine. So he deduced it rather than creating it. But, so with his model, you can apply it to the major arcana. And I've left my Fool behind. So, sorry about that. My Fool is usually a separate card. I knew I'd leave something behind. Interesting that I should leave the Fool behind. Not really. You can all imagine it. I can probably find one anyway. But the Fool, the idea in psychological terms, of course, is that the Fool is, as a life journey, is that the Fool is the soul really non-gendered, that incarnates. And having incarnated, it takes on a gender. And if we take the orthodox masculine model, it then divides into genders, and the magician represents the masculine that is conscious, and the high priestess, the feminine. And then the man goes on their journey, or the human goes on their journey, mother, father, teacher, preacher, falling in love. I'm going through this very fast because there's so much to cover, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with this. And fighting the good fight, you know, to succeed in the outer world. And then in an ideal world, they start to look within. And so this is the Pollock model of the 3 tiers. They start to look at themselves, perhaps get a hint of the spiritual connection as a result of what life deals out to them and how their lives have gone. The reflection they do, they make changes, reach some sort of hopefully inner-outer balance, and then move into the big stuff, the concept of our interconnection. There's a Fool, like this Fool. Whoops. So post-Jungians, so the idea was that it was a male model and that it was designed for men to get in touch with their inner feminine side to some extent. Post-Jungians have tried to modify that model to take in all of us including women. And this quotation comes from someone called Lionel Corbett. Oh, I know what I haven't got is something to wipe the board with. A tissue. I've probably got a tissue somewhere. No. Thank you. Lionel Corbett, who wrote the book, The Religious Function of the Psyche. No, I don't think it might upset the marker. Lionel Corbett, and the book is The Religious Function of the Psyche. And, oh, thanks. And he said the supreme alchemical act of union does not so much represent the union of opposites, but the union of whatever is missing from oneself that is needed in order to feel whole. The supreme alchemical act of union does not so much represent the union of opposites, but the union of what is missing from oneself, at a conscious level he would mean, that is needed in order to feel whole. Now, there's been some wonderful Jungians that have, or people influenced by Jung, who have used Jung's model to develop theories about mythology. And perhaps the most famous of them is Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was perhaps the greatest student of where that orange button's gone. Oh, there. Oh, okay. Of mythology, and he found, studying the myths, the heroic journeys, of course of men, because most of them are, he found that there was a common theme. A common theme which he called the monomyth. He said, in fact, there's only one myth. There's only one heroic myth. You go to any culture and you will find that the heroes take the same journey. Sorry, I think I might have put up the wrong... Start again. Here we go. Joseph Campbell. Whoops. I'm very good at doing things the opposite way around. You can tell I haven't got good... There we go. So he said the hero starts out in the ordinary world. They get a call to adventure in some form. Often they refuse the call initially. They're reluctant. There is an advice and encouragement from a mentor. They cross what he calls the threshold into the other world, or I think he phrases it, into the belly of the whale. And they then have tests and helpers, culminating in the supreme ordeal. And if you think of stories like Lord of the Rings, they follow this model absolutely archetypally. Having gone through the supreme ordeal of slaying the dragon or whatever, either literally or metaphorically, they receive a reward. It might be the woman, the sacred marriage. It might be some boon that they take back to society. They might even have to steal the elixir of life or whatever, and then they have a journey back which is often in flight. So there's quite a few challenges even on the way back. They recross the threshold, that's the resurrection, and they return with the elixir to their ordinary life. But hopefully the whole idea of the journey is they are bigger and better and more understanding. And of course Jung and Campbell would have said that they've grown internally, they've got in, they're greater people, they've got in touch with their feminine side, they're more complete beings. And of course if you apply this to stories like the Holy Grail, it works very well. We have there Parsifal, the innocent, going through many trials and tribulations, tests, testing his weakness and his ignorance, but ultimately coming through as the wise innocent, listening to his feminine side, overcoming his ego, and finally the Fisher King and the land, the masculine and feminine, are restored. But this model works, in my opinion, far less for many of the other heroes of mythology. And without going into their stories at all, simply because we haven't got time, some of them you will know. So if we look at people like Jason and the Golden Fleece, he got it really by very unjust and unfair means. He used Medea, exploited Medea and her skills as a magician, and then when he returned to his homeland was happy enough to see her socially ostracised, and the fact that she then took rather severe revenge is another story. But I don't think Jason really got in touch with his feminine or grew as a person. Likewise, Theseus, who slew the Minotaur, but in the process he only was able to do that with the help of Ariadne, who he later dumped on an island somewhere and didn't even bring home with him. Ulysses doesn't come up much better. So there is really, to me, a whole lot of heroic examples where the male, if we talk in Tara terms, the male certainly got to this card. They did get in touch with their shadow in many cases, overcame some weaknesses that perhaps were inherent in their shadow, but they didn't seem to ever have any contact with the high priestess. I don't feel that they got in touch with their feminine side very much at all. I just think they were products of their society, and the fact, I guess what I'm saying is that the model is great in theory, but in practice, a lot of the heroes of mythology didn't become whole and didn't become sensitive. Jesus is another good example of someone who did, who, well, perhaps he always had it, that feminine side. He's certainly the most wonderful mythic character because he had such tolerance and compassion, and he was non-aggressive. But for many of the heroes, they don't seem to have touched on their feminine side much at all. And certainly their culture, particularly, well, I was going to say particularly the Greek culture, but maybe it's in many cultures.
Can I just say maybe the marriage, in those times, that female figure was that, in a way, symbolic of the feminine side, so that was their reward, but because they got it from somebody else, then within themselves. You know, they got this beautiful goddess.
Yes, yes, that's right, but they didn't actually change their perception of women. Yeah.
Whereas Jesus didn't take a female part.
Yes. Now, when...
Well,
not a surprise. Not a surprise. Now, where you get a... Sorry?
On that journey, where would you say that the hero would say getting in touch with his feminine side? Because
When he goes into the belly of the whale,
the actual...
that's the death. That's the death, and the boon should include. The boon should, like the marriage, the sacred marriage is the marriage of your masculine and feminine.
So it is within that underlying journey.
Yes, and then you resurrect as the new whole person. That's the theory. Now, when Joseph Campbell was perhaps questioned, whoops,
Put it the way you'd want to read it.
whoops. When Joseph Campbell was questioned about, now how do I get this smaller? No, I think I need to. Thank you. When Joseph Campbell was asked, but what about this journey for women? This is what he said. In the whole mythologic tradition, the woman is there. All she has to do is to realise that she's the place that people, notice he says people, he means men, that people are trying to get to. When a woman realises what a wonderful character she is, she's not going to get messed up with the notion of being pseudo-male.
Okay, so we've got it all anyway.
Yes, we don't need to go on a journey. We don't need to. And that doesn't take anything away from him being the most brilliant mythologist, and actually was married to a very evolved and successful woman, actually a ballerina, happily for 40 or 50 years. No, actually, he didn't marry till late, but certainly 40 years, I think. So, I mean, it's not, that's just his perception. He was almost so in awe of many of the qualities of women that he didn't think women needed to go on journeys. Okay. So, I don't know whether anyone wants to, I'll leave it up for a minute. Other males who are also wonderful mythologists like Robert Johnson. He wrote two books, one called, he's written many, but one is called He, in which case he talks about the journey, the man's journey, and he uses Parsifal and the Holy Grail myth as his example for that book. But for the heroine's journey, he uses, which the book's called She, he uses Psyche. Now, I don't know, I haven't got the time today to discuss the myth of Psyche, but to me, Psyche is not a heroine that I want to identify. She's a complete victim. Firstly, to her father, who's sacrificing her to the dragon to save his city, and secondly, to Eros. And when she is tested, because she happens to not follow Eros's instructions, which were that she was never to look at him when he came to make love to her each night, just enjoy it. When she did look at him, she was then subjected to many tests and trials to prove herself, and even then she didn't actively complete those journeys. She was helped by God knows who else, mice and men. The mice helped her do one task, and people felt sorry for her, you know, the poor little innocent victim. Well, that's nice for some people, but it doesn't necessarily satisfy all of us. And so some feminists have said, okay, well, let's have a look at this journey. And one of them is Maureen Murdoch, and she's written a book called The Heroine's Journey. And she's got a good model. It's not one we'll be talking about today. But she's taken directly the Campbell model, and she has said, well, I've got a model, a heroine's model. But you must realise that her model only applies to some women at some times in their lives. And her model is for women, you would call them the daughters of Athena. The women who from childhood identify more with their father and the patriarchy, the patriarchal system, than their mother. In fact, they're quite hostile to mum who's docile and stays at home, you know, seemingly does nothing. Of course, we all know what people who stay at home and bring up children do, but, you know, she doesn't identify this. So she goes out into the world like the men to become successful like the blokes. And according to this model, she finds male mentors along the way and has tests and trials as she climbs the greasy pole to success in the outside world. And then at some point in time, very often midlife, she says, what's it all about? I don't really feel satisfied. Sure, I'm director of a company, or, you know, I've done my own business, but I haven't got a family, or, you know, I don't have time for my family, or whatever. And she then goes down into the underworld and literally goes in, often has a breakdown. And Maureen Murdoch drew a lot from Sylvia Brinton Pereira's book, Descent of the Goddess, which was the descent of Inanna, the queen, to visit her sister Ereshkigal in the underworld. And you can all, I think, still get a wonderful tape by Evelyn Joff, where she discussed that journey when she was talking about the Hanged Man. So this is a fine journey for some women at some times, but it's an inner journey. And I think that we are all, in this day and age, taking outer journeys, and we're taking them all the time. And it doesn't mean we don't do inner work, but we need role models to work with. And so the challenge is to find them in mythology. And hopefully today I'm going to present you with 2 or 3. And they're all different, but they are all, 2 of them are mythic goddesses, virtually impossible to find a heroine, but 2 mythic goddesses and 1 modern day heroine who have gone on extraordinary outer journeys, and they have grown in the process. And why do I think we need to do that? Because today women do have the freedom to initiate, turn that off for a minute, to initiate, take or direct our outer journeys. We tend to understand things better when they're exemplified in story, or some of us do, me being one of them. And as I've said to you, people of my generation, people born in the 40s or even in the 50s, there was virtually no... Ooh, I've upset the god. There were virtually no role models, even in fairy tales, in literature, and certainly in mythology, of different sorts of women, women who took initiative, women with a lot of those outer qualities You know, the sort of passive strength of people like Penelope, Ulysses' wife. They're wonderful role models, but they're only one. And what we need is a variety, because we're all different, and we'll all grasp a different myth or a different heroine to help us along. Mythological stories can give us wisdom with hindsight, so we can reflect on past things in our lives, and they also give us help with foresight. The tarot is also a tool, as you all know, that feeds the soul. It can help us gain wisdom and guidance. And hopefully today I can combine the two. So I've devised, it's funny, you know, when you start doing a workshop or when you start writing or whatever, and I guess for any of you who are artists, when you start a drawing or a painting, it never ends up how you planned it. It sort of takes on a life of its own. And so as this workshop took on a life of its own, a tarot spread was revealed, and I applied that to the heroines that I had used and found that very interesting, and then I applied it to a couple of my own journeys, and hopefully I'll be able to share it with you today. So, just going to give you 5 or 10 minutes to start recording some of your journeys. Now, I've got here major, moderate and small, and past, present, future. This is all very subjective, you know. It's just a matter of listing a few, because later on today we will be working from these. You keep this with you today. It's nothing that I take, but just start reflecting on some past journeys, because we'll probably apply the model later in the afternoon, firstly to a past journey, and then in the last session to a present or future journey. So just in point form, write down a few of the journeys you've taken.
Mythology is more like how at the time, more of the media of the time, like the way that people would communicate to each other at the time.
Yes, it is, but the stories can still ring true for us today. That's why they're so powerful.
So when you are doing a major journey, you know what happened in the past, what's happening at the present?
No. If you're doing, the past column is a journey you've finished. It's a journey you've finished. Like a small past journey might be getting through VCE or going to university and completing it. Or if you've had children many years ago, it's sort of getting through the early years of motherhood or whatever. You have to decide what they are. A present journey is one that's still ongoing, and a future journey is one that you're proposing to take. So even if you can just put 1 or 2 in each column, you hopefully will be able to add to that after today. And then hopefully you'll be able to reflect on those journeys and apply what we do today to different ones. I want to see if people who have stopped writing, maybe to have a bit of a think, or because they've had a bit of a blank, which is often what happens to me when I'm suddenly asked to think about the past in particular, as to who can give us a journey that they've completed. Yes, Linda?
Okay, getting myself together after having a stroke.
Getting yourself together after having a stroke. Well, in fact, the heroic journey probably started with the stroke. Yes, and then the recovery is after that. So that would be a big past journey. You'd call it a past journey?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay, another past journey?
Almost complete. I mean, I went to marriage relationship which ended in divorce, which I think I have now come to terms with. I won't say it's completely.
Yes.
But I think the business is completed. And I feel at peace about it.
Can I just stop you there? Because that particular journey you could subdivide. You could have the journey of the breakdown of the marriage. You could have the journey of the whole marriage.
Yes.
So you can sort of cut a journey up.
Yes,
Yeah.
certainly could. And the other one is I'm almost at the point of retiring as a teacher. So I see that journey. It probably has ended, but I'm not quite financially ready to pull my roots out at the moment.
Yes.
But that's another journey that I see as being completed.
Yes.
Just about being complete.
Okay. Any other past journeys to share?
The migration is a
Yes.
experience.
So there's two very good examples. One, migration to another country and settling in that new country. Another one, as you say, of 5 years in a convent, like a whole different vocation. Any other past ones? Yes. So your journey was to survive almost marriage breakup and cope with it and hopefully grow from it. So it's a sort of relationship journey, isn't it? Between parents and also inner. What about present ones? Does anyone want to share some of those? Someone different?
Define my life partner.
Yes. So this is
I'm not using that word because I'm going. So that just goes.
present or...
Husband's a bit overwhelming.
So, well, that's future, isn't it? After today, unless you're going to meet him on the way out. Oh, the search is now. The search is now. Okay? Yes. So that's interesting because a lot of your present ones will project into the future too.
I feel I need to do that one before I can do the future journey.
Yes. Now. No. No, don't listen to the cynics.
No, I've been through that. I've survived.
Okay, another present one.
Them on their feet
Yes.
and break away at
Yes.
the same time. All of that.
Yes, so it's a journey of moving from the totally all-encompassing mother role to the separation.
Yes.
Yes.
And even a bigger, sort of done that part way, but sort of
Yes.
the next
So it's in progress. Yes, so some will flow through past, present, future. Any other present ones?
It's going to bring out the change of career.
Yes.
So I don't know.
Okay. And Lyndall, future journey?
I'd like to live for a year or two overseas.
Okay, so travel, yes. Jill? A future journey? Big, moderate or small? It sounds wonderful. I had long-haired Dachshunds when I was married. One was called Jason and one was called Jemima, and they were just gorgeous, but they are yappy dogs. So.
I know they are.
Yappy dogs. Okay. As I say, you'll probably add a great deal to that list and get more of a feel, to the list, maybe as the day goes on, but certainly in the time ahead. And because I'd like to feel that the workshop is such that you go away not only saying, oh, well, it wasn't a bad day, but I've got something meaningful that I can use in the time ahead. In my personal development, which most of us, I would say, use the tarot a great deal for wisdom and guidance in that respect. So we're going to talk about the journeys of 3 heroines. And as I said, it's very hard to find heroines in mythology, but there's certainly 2 or 3 goddess heroines. And I've chosen Isis and a wonderful Hawaiian goddess called Hiaka, who is my current passion. And please watch this space. In about 5 years, I'm hoping to take the journey that she took and then take other people to take the journey she took. But this is my pipe dream, or one of them. Oh, I shouldn't call it a pipe dream. This is one of my fantasies. I haven't even been to Hawaii yet, so.
You should, there's a movie out that you should watch, and it's called Whale Rider.
I've seen it.
Have you seen that?
Yes.
Fall in love with that?
Yes, I like that very much. Wonderful heroine in that. One thing that we are getting through some movies now is much stronger and outer, heroic in the outer sense, female characters. So we're going to talk about what I set myself, I made myself a promise, and that was that I would limit myself to somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes in telling the story of each heroine. In the case of Hiaka, it might take a little bit longer, but in the other 2, so if you want to know much more detail about these people, you'll probably have to research it yourself, and perhaps you'll be inspired to. Many of you will know something about Isis, so I probably speak. Sorry, I'm just going to focus. I probably speak least about her. Thank you. So Isis came from great pedigree stock. From the primordial ocean, the cosmic egg, Nun, Atum Ra, the sun god, and he begot Shu and Tefnut, Shu being the air or the atmosphere, and Tefnut, moisture. And out of that union came Nut and Geb, or Jeb. And in fact, Nut and Jeb were so passionately in love that Ra was jealous of their union and insisted that Shu, who was the god of air, separate them. And it's one of my favourite symbols. Nut being the goddess of the heroines and Jeb being the god of earth, separated by their father, air. And out of their union was usually, in most versions, 2 brothers and 2 sisters, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. And Osiris and Isis married and became the rulers of Egypt. And theirs was a union of equality. Isis was the co-ruler of Egypt. She was a true consort. And when her husband, and they ruled wisely and well, and when her husband Osiris decided that he had been so successful in developing Egypt that he that he wanted to spread his message further. We still see that today in every culture, people wanting to spread their rulership further. He set off to expand his political horizons, and he left Isis as ruler of Egypt. And it is said that she ruled Egypt equally well in his absence. The problem was that their brother, Set, was very jealous. He wanted to rule Egypt. And so he conspired with certain of the power brokers in the countries that Osiris was influencing. He conspired Osiris's death, and they built a sarcophagus that was just the right size for Osiris's body. They sort of tricked him into trying it out for size, and then they nailed it down, which left him to die, suffocate. And they floated the sarcophagus down the Nile, and it floated into the Mediterranean Sea. And it eventually landed near the city of Byblos, and it was entwined in a tamarisk tree that was growing on the bank. And the king of Byblos thought it was such a magnificent tree, he was unaware of the sarcophagus within it, but it was partly such a magnificent tree because of that energy, that he had it cut down because he was building a new palace. And he used the trunk of that tree, which included the sarcophagus, as the central pillar for his new palace. When Isis found out about the death of her husband, she was absolutely mortified and devastated. And many, if not most, mythologists say, of course, that she was driven by her love for Osiris to go and find him. I can't help feeling that she was a very pragmatic woman if she was able to rule with such power, that she was also driven by the fact that they had no heir. And if she didn't provide an heir, then the evil Set would in fact definitely take over rulership of the land, because it was still a patriarchal society. This is a modern version of Isis. I love the boobs on it. You know, we've all got the fake boobs now, so even the drawings. I'm not saying she didn't have a big bust, but there's just something about the shape of it. It looks like those fake ones. But there she is on a boat sailing toward, down the Nile. And she is in search of her husband. And one of the things that is obvious throughout the myth of Isis is the fact that she was always, from the very beginning of her journey, very much in touch with her feminine, with her high priestess. She was a magician, and she did many magical things that assisted her on her journey and brought Osiris ultimately back to life. But her high priestess, her feminine, was definitely a very powerful force. She was also very in touch. We know she was an emperor. She was ruling a patriarchal society in her husband's absence. But she was also an empress. She had a great passionate love for her husband and a very powerful driving force to have a child. And in fact, most of the depictions we see of her, or many of them, are the Isis sitting on the throne nursing Horus, their son. And in fact, many people say that it was that effigy that inspired the Madonna child of Christianity later. So already you can see that, before I even finish the story, that she's different to a male hero. She's starting off from different space, even though she's on an outer journey. The journey that she takes, we can't discuss all the details, but it's a long and a tedious process, not unlike that of Demeter in search of Persephone, except she's looking for her husband, not her daughter. And she finally convinces, after a great deal of trouble, but she convinces through diplomacy. Never does she use violence. She convinces, not in this journey. She convinces the king of Byblos to give her the sarcophagus. She then has the long trek back to Egypt with the dead body in the coffin, and there she uses her magical powers, her wings of the kite, which is one of the birds of Egypt, to breathe life back into Osiris. Some say it's at that point that they conceived the son Horus. Others say they hadn't got that far when Seth found out about it, and he said, right, this time she won't be able to recover him. He killed Osiris for a second time and chopped his body into 13 pieces and placed those pieces, hid those pieces in various parts of the land. But Isis, not to be deterred, continued on her journey and found one piece at a time and put the pieces together. Some say that the only piece she couldn't find was the vital piece as far as reproduction's concerned. And I won't say any more on that subject or I'll sound really awful. And that she had to mould that from clay. But one way or another, again, she breathed life into Osiris, and they were able to unite in sexual union, the Horus Gamus, from which Horus, the son, was conceived. The son who would later become the ruler of Egypt. So you can see all of those cards, all of that top journey are very powerful for her. Certainly the Hierophant, if it represents structures and conformity, which is one of its meanings, she was never rebelling against her society. But she was a very, very much taking an outer journey, and a successful one at that. So just to have a bit of a look at a summary, we can see that her qualities, loyalty, determination, focus, endurance, resolve, foresight, faith. Can you think of any others?
Ingenuity?
Yes, ingenuity.
What faith did you?
Faith in herself, yeah, and faith in her powers. Very strong magician, but very foresight and insight, you could have put as well, very much high priestess. And, you know, Hierophant Strong here, Osiris was the rightful king. She was the rightful queen. Their child was the rightful heir to the throne, and she was determined it was going to happen. She was principally driven by love, sorrow, because there's many references to her sorrow at the loss of her beloved, but also the desire to reproduce. So very strong energies here. Having achieved what they wanted to achieve, Osiris then declared his intention to go to the underworld and become the ruler of the underworld. And she then spent the rest of her life more in the role of mother than in the role of consort. But she had occasions to visit the underworld to reunite with him from time to time. So what we're going to do after the break, and we're dead on time, exactly, I'm going to show you a spread that I have developed, or maybe I'd say the High Priestess developed, because I didn't actually intend it to happen, that it would happen this way. And a spread I did after meditation on Isis about her journey. And then we'll start to look at Hiaka. So let's have a tea break. And any questions before we go on? Jump over into Pisces, and I'm completely away with the pixies, but I have in fact, I don't know how I've done this, but I have in fact failed to photocopy the spread, which means that I've got it on overhead, and unfortunately you will have to draw it yourselves. But that's all right. There's worse things I could have forgotten. Now, get rid of this. Oh, that's a problem. That's all right. So I was asked a question during the break about, could you just repeat the question? Yes, how do you define a journey, really? Well, I guess it's really in the way that to some extent Campbell was doing. It's something you are called to take, either by yourself or by someone else or by society. You perhaps may or may not be reluctant about taking it. You finally take the plunge. You go through many challenges, tests and trials. You may find allies and mentors along the way. And the tests and trials perhaps culminate in the biggest trial or the biggest challenge of all, after which you've received the boon, which may be the inner growth, but it may be a material thing. And you know, that's, and you sort of return back to the world. What Lynette was saying was that when she was filling in her sheet, you don't mind me sharing this, that some of her past journeys, as she looked at them, she said, well, I don't know whether I completed them. They're just sort of on hold or whatever. And that's fine, because one of the things that this might inspire is a revisiting of them. And you could still perhaps do the spread that we're going to learn or explore, and that might help you to understand where you've come, why it's on hold, whether it's going to continue, whether you'll ever get back to it. Maybe we do have some unfinished journeys. Maybe there are some things we go on journeys to do that we ultimately find at some point, no, this isn't my journey, and we give up. But of course, people don't write about those sorts of journeys because it's not very exciting. But how many things?
You might pick up a journey that you might, I'm looking at mine, you might pick up a journey that you completed earlier and do it again.
Yes, in a different way.
Or find that some journey here connects with this. Yeah.
In an ideal world, all roads lead to Rome, actually. And I think we learn to understand that a bit more as we go on. Now, should I wait for these two people? Oh, okay. Basically, I just ended up doing a spread with the major arcana as I was studying Isis, and then I sort of knew what each card was meant to represent, and then I was thinking about how I'd set them out. And I guess again I was inspired by this model which Ouspensky, P.D. Ouspensky, talks about in his tarot book. He's one of the sort of older gurus of esoteric matters. His book's called The Symbolism of the Tarot, and he talks about, he relates the whole of the tarot to this model of existence. How it comes about is, he says, basically, although he doesn't express it like this, he says, I don't care whether the major and minor arcana were together or separate originally, but in fact they all make sense as a part of our whole life's journey. And as a model for tarot, he put the Fool in the centre, representing the soul, or the self with a capital S. He put the 21 major arcana cards, the other 21 major arcana cards, in the triangle, 7 on each side. And he said they represent the noumenal side of our existence. They represent our spiritual side. They represent our relationship to the divine. And that makes sense, because the major arcana are the archetypal energies that are collectively available. Many would say from a higher source. And then he put the 56 minor arcana cards around the end, 14, around in the square. And he said, that's our day-to-day, that's the material world. And that is equally important to us. So because we are talking about more, or I am anyway, the noumenal, the archetypal aspect of our lives, the psycho-spiritual aspects of our lives, I decided on a triangle. And this is my, no, it's not for Isis, this is the spread. This is the heroine's journey that I devised. And it'll be up for a while, so, and what I might even do at lunchtime is try and photocopy it if there's a what's the name of those office works nearby? Okay.
We can put it on the web.
Oh, all right. We'll put it on the website. I'll think about that. Okay. So we start with the self. The archetypal energy that consciously initiates the journey. Number 2, as we go down the left-hand side of the triangle, is the archetypal energy most easily accessible for conscious assistance on the journey. In other words, what we're doing out there in the world, this is the archetypal energy that we can most draw on from within ourselves, but use consciously. Number 3, at the bottom of the left-hand side of the triangle, we have the archetypal energy providing inner wisdom and guidance for the journey, our inner mentor. Then as we go across, number 4, the main purpose of the journey in terms of our personal development. So not sort of talking so much, we're talking major arcana cards here. So we're not saying the main purpose of the journey is to get a promotion. We're talking about the main purpose of the journey in terms of how we develop in terms of our personal growth. And that might be through a promotion, but it's not quite that material. And then number 5, to the right, bottom right-hand side, is the main challenge to be confronted on the journey. And once again, because the major arcana is talking about archetypes and that all of these archetypes relate to all of us at different times, this main challenge could easily be internal and or external. But this is very much about our personal growth, this spread. But often, because what is happening within is often reflected without, an inner archetypal challenge will be perhaps personified in the outside world. And then as we go up the right-hand side, number 6 is the principal boon to be received from taking the journey. And again, we're talking boon to our personal growth or materially as well. Just prize, benefit. And the central card is the attainment, the personal growth, the overall personal growth that we've come to. I'm doing ISIS, so obviously it has.
If you were using it yourself.
We're going to be doing one on a past journey and one on a future one or a present one as the day progresses. But let's just look at Isis's journey. And what I actually did, I did a meditation, and which we'll also be doing at some stage. And I said to myself, well, if this spread doesn't seem to make any sense in relation to Isis's journey, I know I'm on the wrong track here. But it did. The magic of the tarot never ceases to amaze, never ceases to amaze us, really. I'm sure you all find that it doesn't matter how often we use it, we tend to find it extraordinary. So I will show you the cards that I received when I asked the High Priestess to show me how it fitted for Isis.
The Isis as an archetype.
No, we're considering her journey. No, I'm considering her as a heroine. I'm considering her as a heroine. And these are the archetypal energies. Just seem to have misplaced, oh there it is, the world and the chariot. Okay. And of course I had a slight temptation to cheat here. I had a very slight temptation because I thought, why is that there and that there? But of course, as time went on, So look at number 1. The archetypal energy consciously initiating the journey. What was it? The death of her husband. A sudden and unexpected catastrophe which affected her both internally and externally. And that's what we find, that what is reflected inside is reflected in the what is inside is reflected in the outside world. Her inner ally. Why do we have the Empress there as the inner ally? Most easily to access for assistance. Yes, she was driven by love and she was driven by the desire to reproduce, both Empress energies. She also is a goddess that was passionate about the land and the environment, although of course in ancient times it was more Osiris who was the god of the land, and she was the Nile River that flowed through it and watered it. So they worked very much in combination. But so at all levels, she was very comfortable with that ally. Her inner mentor was the High Priestess. So she, as I said again, unlike some of the male heroines and male heroes, oh, there's a Freudian slip. Unlike the male heroes, she had very much a strong relationship with the High Priestess. Her main purpose, now why the chariot? Just hypothesise, there's no right or wrong here.
The balance of female and male energies, to bring them together.
Yes.
Is something futuristic.
Yes, yes.
But she also went on an outer journey.
She went on an outer journey. She did. Yes, that's absolutely true.
But she wanted to regain control of the situation.
Yes.
It's part of being a hero for yourself.
Yeah, sorry?
It is the card to be
Yes,
a hero or
yes.
for yourself.
So this was confirming to me, yes, it was almost that card that said to me, yes, you know, this is her outer journey. She took an outer journey. She became an active hero.
But she also allowed her inner self to guide her on that journey. So she set off down the Nile and ended up over in
Yes, Byblos.
Byblos,
Yes.
which is where? In Palestine.
Yes. Now, her main challenge. Why is the sun her main challenge? This was real food for thought for me.
Well, there's no real break. If she achieved her goal, then she'd have joy or what she wanted. But if she didn't,
Yes,
it was almost back to the tower again.
yes.
Or death.
Well, it was certainly the end of her power, because Seth would take over. Any other theories on?
Not to get caught up in the optimism. You need something a little bit more than that to work on.
Yes, there's another way of reading it.
She wanted to